Hello, welcome to Spring Forest Qigong's Heart Wisdom series. I'm Glen, Tobey. This series gives the opportunity for Spring Forest Qigong practitioners, trainers, healers, instructors to share a perspective on a topic of their choice that relates to heart wisdom. So today we have really a very powerful topic that really affects all of us in a very personal and dynamic way. And our guest today will help explain that in a very brilliant way and a very practical way as well. So today we have Dr. Christine Gibson. And so I would like to introduce her to our show. And maybe, Christine, if you could say a couple of words about yourself, and then we'll be on the roll.
Sure. So I'm Christine or Christy Gibson, and I'm a family doctor in Calgary in Canada. So that's Western Canada. And I've been a physician for 22 years now. And I started to just ask a lot of questions about how else the body heals, because I started to recognize that it wasn't congruent with my own beliefs and experiences on healing that we should be using a pill for everything. So I have become a practitioner of many different kinds of healing elements over the last probably 10 years now. So I would say I'm a physician, but I'm a transdisciplinary practitioner now. I'm an author. I just wrote a book called The Modern Trauma Toolkit. And I have been working in health equity spaces, so communities that are equity deserving and often facing a lot of marginalization and oppression for the entirety of my career.
Wow, this is so impressive. And it sounds like you do a lot of heart work. The things you're connected to and constantly wanting to learn more and understand things, not like settling for one thing. But let's take a look at how we can eventually help as many people as we can. So today you picked, yeah. So today you picked a topic of what? Trauma stories with Spring Forest Qigong?
Well, and I think we were talking about trauma and post-traumatic growth and just, how trauma affects the body. And I'm more than happy to share my experience with Qigong as it relates to that.
Well, why don't you just keep on going and talk a little bit maybe about what trauma is and then and how it affects the body. That's okay.
Sure.
Christine had said that there might be someone in the house and the dog might be barking. So we'll just fill in a little bit of space that the dog maybe is want to contribute his or her impression about trauma. And now that the dog has settled down and Christy's come back, Christy will respond now with saying, what is trauma anyway? And then how does it affect the physical, maybe emotional body as well? Now, I know you can go on forever on that.
I could, so I count on you to stop me from doing that. What I don't think I recognize both as a physician and then as a person who's looking after, people in a professional way was just how much trauma was intermingled with those experiences from both sides. I didn't recognize how much pain I was seeing and how much suffering I was seeing and really absorbing that and not allowing myself to feel my full emotional experience because we're told, there's a boundary and you're not allowed to have that amount of empathy. But at the same time, we're experiencing this vicarious trauma and bearing witness to so much discomfort. So I think for myself, there was this time where I started to recognize that I needed more personal practices to be able to move through the pain of the work. And then there was also a time where I started to recognize that I just didn't have a lot of tools in my toolbox for a lot of what I was seeing, and that was moving pain through the body. So people would have terrible childhood experiences. They would suffer a traumatic event as an adult. And as a physician, there's no pill to help them with that. And it took me a really long time to learn the different things that could help a person move that pain through their body and help me feel like I was more effective and actually focused on what mattered to them. So that's the journey I've been on for the last decade or so.
Well, say, could you briefly describe, like, when a traumatic event happens? Again, there's intensity and all that. What happened? What's the pathway that a traumatic event has within the body? Is there a simple way to say it kind of gets here and then it's activated and then it moves into and then it activates? Is there some way for all of us to have a simplified expression of the flow of the trauma in the body?
Yeah. I mean, there are two kinds of trauma. There is a relational trauma where somebody is harming you emotionally or physically, and it's between people. So, relational trauma is oftentimes what we call complex trauma, and it's a number of incidences that happen over time. And many people face that who have had childhood experiences, and this is a very common form of trauma. Each individual event has a pathway into the body through the neurobiology, and it's through our five senses. Those senses are recognized by our amygdala, which is kind of like the part of our brain that is looking for danger. It's the center that filters all of the input into the brain and decides whether or not something that's happening to the mind body system is safe or dangerous. So I think of it as kind of like the fire alarm. It's letting you know if there's smoke in the room. And it does that through our senses. So our senses, interestingly, except for smell, they all input through the thalamus, and then it goes to the amygdala, and the amygdala is deciding safe or dangerous. And if it decides that the input to our senses is dangerous, then our traumatic response becomes very much like a reflex. So many people would have heard of fight, flight, and freeze. Well, those are often not in conscious control. If our amygdala decides something is dangerous, then the body just kind of takes over and goes into one of those states. So fight and flight happen through the sympathetic nervous system, and that is this nervous system of movement. Sympathetic doesn't mean that you're in danger. Sympathetic just means you're moving. It sends your energy to your heart and to your muscles, and it allows the body movement. When it's overactive, it's wanting your body to run away or fight off a problem. And unfortunately, that mechanism is built into our body as a mammal that, you know, millions and millions of years ago, that made sense. It was an adaptive response because we were generally fighting off a predator or a natural disaster. And unfortunately, now that in modern times,
So on my screen, we just lost Christy. I think it'll come back. Here we go. Christy? Oh, she's moving her computer. Can you hear me, Christy?
sorry, we signals. I'm going to just try a different room to see if it's better.
So where does, now that you've explained a little bit of how the brain reacts to a threat of some sort, then where does the vagus nerve and in the spinal area, how does that play a picture here?
Sure. So did you hear my explanation about the sympathetic nervous system?
Yeah, that came through.
Perfect. Okay. So the next part of it is the freeze state. So we have two freeze states in the body. One is a high tone freeze, and that's a total overwhelm of that sympathetic tone where you're just stuck in the body in that way. And there's also a low tone freeze, and that's what has to do with the vagus nerve.
We seem to be having some technical difficulties. I think I'm experiencing a little bit of a trauma right now. My brain is trying to decide, is this dangerous or not? Hi, Christy. You were just off for about 10 seconds. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know why it keeps disappearing.
yeah. Well, let's just keep going on as best as we can. And oh, wait. Here we go. We're back visually, Christy. No, off again. So I hope you all, as you're listening to this in and out, that even now, just think about the idea of how the brain gets, activated when a situation, there's a level of threat to it. So in my head, it's almost, I'll chatter a little bit until Christy can come back. A little bit in my Spring Forest Qigong thinking. I'll tell you about that later. But Christy, back to you, as long as you're somehow connected again.
I don't know what's happening. This has never happened before, so we'll power through.
Same with you.
So what I was explaining was the other way that the body responds to a big stressor is to actually slow down. So the sympathetic nervous system causes movement and makes the organism try to escape the problem. There's another one that's the freeze state, which is when we basically are just still and hoping that the problem goes away. And so in a mammal body, it would make sense that an animal might just try to get really small and curl up into fetal position or pretend to be dead or play possum and hope that the predator believes that they're dead and walk away. But in a human body, what ends up happening is a person feels like, well, I can't get out of bed and I can't get off the couch, and they're stuck in this stillness. And from the perspective of a biological theorem called polyvagal theory, we have two branches of our vagus nerve, and there's one branch that goes into the face, and it allows us to show up in safety when we have a calm facial expression and a melodic and gentle tone of voice. That signals safety to other people, and that's through one branch of the vagus nerve. In medicine, we call that cranial nerve 10. And then there's this other branch of our vagus nerve, which I think is very much regulated through the practice of Qigong. And that branch goes down into the body and it just slows everything down. So when that branch is overactive, that's what causes the freeze state. But when it's in a calm position, it just slows us down and allows us to be more still. And in Qigong, what I think we do is we create a window of tolerance, or a window where those two nervous states are in a beautiful balance, where we have some sympathetic tone and we are able to move, but we have a lot of parasympathetic input as well. And we're able to be slow and very, very deliberate. So we have this really slow, careful movement. And I think that's such a practice of balancing those two nervous system states.
So then, some of the approaches to someone feeling a threat, can be this particular form of a Qigong.
I think what Qigong allows us to do is to practice to be in the body in both of those nervous system states, but without being in a state of overwhelm. So it reminds the body you can be in sympathetic, you can have movement, but it doesn't have to be fight or flight. And you can be in parasympathetic, you can have calmness and stillness, but it doesn't have to be freeze. So I think it allows us to practice that window of tolerance.
Is there a way, what do you think the body reacts? How does the body know that the threat is either subdued or lessened, or so that fire alarm, so to speak, is not going on either momentarily or over days or weeks? How does the body know?
Well, our amygdala, there's these small parts of the brain called the amygdalas, and they're in the very center of the brain, and they're constantly scanning.
So this is really great information. Looking forward to hearing a bit more. Hi.
I don't know how much you heard, Glen.
Not
I
the
don't know
last
why.
part you tuned on. Yeah, not to worry. If it goes off, we'll go off and we'll carry on and have you back when we can. But you were just explaining a little bit about the small parts of the amygdala.
Yeah, the small parts of the brain that is your fire alarm, and it's constantly
Yeah.
scanning both the inside of your body and the outside environment, looking for danger. So for some people who have pain signals or other signals that are uncomfortable within the body, the amygdala might notice those. And for lots of other people, there might be something in our environment, whether it's people or otherwise, that it is sending a danger cue. But for lots of people, what ends up happening is that sense of danger gets locked in place. And you're constantly feeling like you're in danger, even when that input, the signal, has stopped. And in that case, it's a problem with the pathway. And so for many people who have chronic pain, part of the theory is that the pain signals have stopped in the area that feels uncomfortable. What the body is experiencing is actually a pathway that's stuck on that's telling you about the pain. And that's why something like Qigong can be so powerful, because it can help you turn that pathway off.
Or does it open up to a better sense of balance? If the body is sensing there's an imbalance here, there's a threat, there's an outside threat that has come into my vibrational body, and so we need to marshal our efforts in order to what? Balance the body's energy like we used to have it before the threat came in.
Well, and I can't tell you that's what's happening in the biology, because that's not something I can measure. Like the things that I'm describing, we can see on an fMRI scan or a PET scan or something that will measure what's happening in the brain. Do I believe that we're shifting the energies and allowing more flow? Absolutely. And that's the kind of thing that we can see within the nervous system when we're measuring a person whose state is changing, is we can see a lot more flow through the system. So when we're talking about moving the energy and moving it through that channel and through the dantians, we could be opening up more movement through the vagus nerve. I just can't link the biology together, but I can certainly have a sense of what I feel in my own body and what I notice in people.
Yeah, I realize I'm talking to a neuroscientist, a medical doctor who likes measurement and things. And it's such a beautiful way of understanding how the body works. However, if we're looking also at how does that, the other side, so another way of knowing through the balancing of that energy, through the lower dantian, the middle dantian, moving the energy up the spine, over the head, all those other kind of, in one sense, immeasurable things. Somehow, though, it's an attempt at balancing that energy in the body, whatever's been activated. So that was my curiosity. Not that it has to be measured, but what's your understanding of your involvement in Spring Forest Qigong and how that seems to have an impact on the body in its reaction to trauma?
Well, the reason I mentioned chronic pain was when I was doing, I don't remember which level it was, but I was doing, I think, level 2 um, at the actual Spring Forest Qigong Center. This was a number of years ago. And one of the classmates in my group was actually doing studies that were measuring the differences in the mind-body system regarding pain. So I know that you can measure some of these things, and that's very interesting to me that you can find that proof of the energy shifting. From a trauma perspective, what I would speculate is that what the nervous system is allowing is for more flow. And when we get stuck in a sympathetic state, or when we get stuck in that vagus nerve, that parasympathetic state, that's either one becomes very overactive, what we need to do is to open up channels of flow so that things start moving in a natural way again. So what would make sense to me is if Qigong movement is allowing that flow of energy once more in a system that has become stuck, where there's some kind of obstruction. So, I mean, I can't tell you that this is what shows up on a scan, but that would be my, explanation behind what I experience and what I see.
Yeah, so maybe the other word is blockage. Something prevents the flow from going. There's a blockage somewhere. So like when you took the level 2, the idea of healing others, you learned those techniques of how to detect where there's a blockage, where to work on where the blockage is, in order for the system to move. So there's a kind of the theory in the Qigong really about how to detect whatever the blockage is, wherever the blockage may be. Staying away from the symptom perhaps, but looking at the root. So then, so to speak, someone in trauma you might be able to then detect, using the technique the Master Lin teaches us, to detect where is the blockage along the spine, where is the blockage within, how come the information or the energy, the chi isn't flowing well here or there. Oh, there seems to be a blockage in that, this part of the spine. Is there some way we can work on opening up that part of the spine? So almost thinking we're talking in terms of, if you left the language of threat and just looked at threat as a vibration, oh, this vibration has entered the body and the rest of the body doesn't like this vibration. So we have to find a way to balance this new vibration that's in our body. Oh, this new vibration has blocked part of our spine. Oh, let's figure out how we can help balance the vibration that's in the body. That's, as an intruder, this is not a vibration that the body wants to keep around. Is that far-fetched thinking?
What you're describing is more like a physical trauma. Emotional trauma is really, so it's stored in the brain and the body simultaneously.
Yeah.
In medicine, we would always be taught that it was in the brain, that your memory center would store the traumatic event and your amygdala would store the context associated with the event. And what I've come to learn now through work of Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, Pat Ogden, is that trauma is also stored in our body. And so what I believe makes sense is that the body's movement allows release of the trauma that's stored in our tissues. So there's many different practices, including things like martial arts and yoga, that have amazing outcomes when we study PTSD and emotional trauma. And it makes sense that Qigong is even more adept at moving this through the body, because it is a system that's designed to move blocked energy.
Yeah. So again, if we keep looking at what's the uniqueness of the Qigong, I think martial arts, that physical movement, dancing, any of that kind of stuff, it really is a way in which to, release the stress. Before we went on today, I was in my office here doing a little stretching, just getting my body a little bit unkinked. It feels good, but it doesn't get to a deeper level. And so I feel this, for me, a little temporary stretching. And then if I sit here now for the 10, 15 minutes, my body can start to tighten up a bit. So my physical body, because it keeps remembering, like the fear I have in kind of talking online. Whoops. Or the fear I have of the screen going dark. Because I think where I'm moving toward, and really wanting to have Christy's opinion. So like there's in the physical body, right, we can release it, but does it get released like permanently? So if I do the martial arts, or if I do go dancing and I feel better, is that a temporary impact on the nervous system, or is it like it's fixed? We got the dam blown up and everything's flowing now. So what's your understanding of, how the body, I love because, the body remembers. It's so beautiful. This everything that happens to us, actually what our body remembers. It's just whether it's a dangerous thing or whether it's a picnic or something. So when does the body know?
People are very different. So I can't say that dance cures everybody, and I certainly can't say that dance cures nobody. But what I can say is that Spring Forest Qigong is a healing modality. So it's not just a movement modality. And that makes it quite different in terms of intention. It is much more than physical movement. So you're getting multi-layers of energetic shifting, because you're setting your intention, you're checking in with your energetic body. So it's not just physical movement, it's energetic movement. And I think that's probably the main difference between the other forms of movement that can be healing, is Qigong would have a greater capacity for healing because of that.
So maybe if I can take this a step further. So if I have the trauma, my body feels, traumatized, simply put. And so now I dance for a while and I feel better. And then, next day, well, the trauma is kind of coming back. Dance again, dance. So then I practice dancing. And every time I dance, I remember the feeling that dancing gave me, that I'm safer now. So I continue dancing, so it's going to help my body. Where I think with Qigong, you're working at a deeper level. So the more you get into that whole energetic flow, you don't necessarily have to repeat it for the rest of your life. That you really are altering the way in which the vibration now, what power, it's almost becoming like balanced in terms of it, the frightening part that it may not come back again because you've changed the energy around. It's not measurable. Like, the small universe meditation?
Yes.
Pardon? So that's what I mean. I was wondering if, from your experience, it does that small universe meditation where it takes it through up the spine and up the neck and over through the brain and back down. Do you think that is a way of impacting, the organ systems or the regulatory systems that you're talking about with the amygdala, the vagus brain? What do you think that meditation does in our body in relationship to trauma? 10 words or less.
Well,
What's,
I mean,
what's
that's a really specific question, Glenn. So I don't know if I can answer that one specifically, because I can't give.
No. What's your impression?
I can't give a professional, certain explanation of it. I can only, I can speculate. I can guess. I would think that because a lot of what gets stuck after trauma is in that central channel, where your spinal cord runs through and your vagus nerve runs closer to the heart from where the spinal cord is, but it runs through that back channel as well. So it makes sense that this central channel within our body, when we are focused on shifting energy in that region, we are able to open up the flow within our nervous system. So both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic channels are right in the middle, like running through that spinal cord area, and that vagus nerve is also through that central channel. So it makes sense that there would be blockages and obstructions in that central region, and that when we're focused on the head, where the amygdala and the hippocampus and the thalamus and all of these parts of the brain that are involved in the trauma response, and then that central channel, all of that would provide more energetic flow to these things that are stuck, those signals that get stuck.
Yeah. That's why I was wondering, when Master Lin teaches us about chi activation, activate the chi, because that it has the intelligence and the information, and it knows where to go in the body. So if I'm activating the chi, then it's going to know, oops, Glen's amygdala's got a little imbalance here, or Glen's, that then the chi is doing the clearing, so to speak, the balancing. So when we spend time focused on activating the chi, then, so I know for me, when I get a little nervous or worried or a little bit upset, I'll do the small universe, like for a minute or 2 minutes. I'll just move that energy through my body, like as if I'm doing that meditation for a long time. And it feels like almost immediately there's a sense of balance. Now, if the aliens are invading and the Martians are firing guns at us, I might not sit down and do a meditation, because that trauma is right there. But almost like if in that kind of a trauma, if I quickly did what? Like run the small universe, I might react to that trauma differently. So I was curious whether that the practice of Qigong actually may help someone in a situation that could be traumatic, or more could be a level of trauma that they could almost, I'm going to run the small universe, I'm going to run the small universe, I'm going to move that energy in order to a little bit be preventive of the impact that the trauma has upon imbalancing our system.
Yeah, that's another great question, Glenn. My sense is that it can be both preventative and responsive or adaptive. So the preventative aspects are allowing your nervous system to be in more flow, and to really practice that balance of having an active sympathetic state but not overactive, and an active parasympathetic state and not overactive. So as you described, the balance between those energies, and it's that balance between movement and stillness. So your body is learning that in a preventative way, so that it's used to showing up with some movement, but not an overwhelming amount, and some calmness, but not just laying down and pretending the problem isn't happening. So it allows you to practice that balance. And then likewise, when you're responding to a threat in the moment, your body will be more adept at showing up in that balanced state.
Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Absolutely.
Well, that's what I'm looking for, is what makes sense to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then it is like the balance, the body is great. You know, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic and all this stuff that's set up in our body is just marvelous. But when it gets a little tilted this way or a little tilted that way, oh, then it gets a little quirky here, a little bit this. So I'm thinking, so then the energy that's natural, just trying to come back to, not like on a 1 to 10 scale, come back to a 5. You don't have to underreact. You don't have to overreact now. You know, come back. Let's balance this and let's balance this. So you're doing your normal, you know, healthy things in your body, not waiting for the next threat.
Well,
But in one sense, you've returned this. Yeah.
I think the
Please.
focus on the mind and the body at the same time is also a really important practice for people who've been through trauma or who are anticipating trauma, because a lot of times we lose touch with our own system, and we don't listen to the signals, we don't pay attention to the signals. So practicing something called interoception, or listening to the signals of our body, is another really important aspect of Qigong, and just knowing, where is my body in space? What are the things that I'm experiencing? What are the signals coming from, you know, the movement, and where is my hand right now? Is it passing in front? Is it passing behind? What's happening to my insides? Like, you know, are you actually feeling something in your lower dantian? And you could experience that in your brain, that feeling. So I think just becoming more aware of the mind body is another really important aspect to how Qigong is healing in trauma.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, like the martial arts and the dancing, if we've used those as examples, they're absolutely not bad at all, you know. But it's not the same focus on what is really happening to my body. So I'm not dancing, you know, thinking, oh, what is going on in my body? No, I'm just physically wanting to be involved. Whereas with Qigong, no, it's a more mindset, a more deliberate focus. What is this feeling in my body? Where is it feeling stuck? Or what can I do to, you know, take care of things?
And in Qigong, you're looking for synchrony as well. So in some of the movements, Master Lin will say, and then move from side to side along with your breath. So you'll go on one side and you'll breathe in, and you'll go on the other side and breathe out. And this synchrony is also really important for us to establish that connection, and even just remembering to breathe. I mean, for a lot of people after trauma, that connection to breath can be lost. So having all of these as a part of our daily embodied practice, it really sets us up to be able to handle challenges, physical, mental, social, relational challenges.
And as you're saying that, then you can have an overall sense of confidence inside you. So when things happen out there, I'm not vulnerable to everything out there. I know if something happens out there, I know some things I can do to take care of this, whether the trauma is kind of severe or whether it's a mild attack by a squirrel, so to speak. The confidence inside me is I can deal with things a lot quicker and really in within myself with more depth. And so then the confidence to live your life knowing that you can prepare yourself for whatever happens. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, medication, I think medication is fine, but then I'm waiting for the pill to take effect. And now my focus is on the pill, which is good, as opposed to right away I can activate my body in a different way to balance.
Yeah.
What other, oops. I think I love this conversation. I wish we could go on for days and days. So maybe our system gets overloaded by the really good knowledge that Christy is sharing with us. That's why I said everybody has to understand this topic that Christy is presenting. So, do you have some other free flowing thoughts that you'd like to uh, share?
Well, one other thing that I noticed when I was studying different trauma modalities is that Qigong is such an ancient system and it's been known for so long that it already has a lot of innate ways that the
Mm-hmm.
body is a self-healing organism. So when I studied something called tremoring or tension releasing exercises, there was some aspects of it that reminded me of qigong, like moving from side to side and establishing your feet on the ground. And the tremor itself, like a lot of times, Master Lin will recommend that we shake and then hold your hands up and shake. And that is another aspect of releasing our sympathetic tone. So the more that I studied other trauma modalities, the more that it brought me back to the things that I had learned in Qigong because they're already
Mm-hmm.
built in. So I think
Right.
when Master Lin was distilling, the thousands of movements in Qigong practice he had studied into Spring Forest, he kept a lot of those key elements that the body already has these innate ways of self-healing. And so he's activating those.
Yeah. So, like you said before with Vanderkolken about his book, The Body Remembers or Keeps Score. So the body can remember what? Not just the trauma, but everything. Oh, I remember how to come back to myself. I remember how to do these moves. I remember, oh, this is going to bring me a greater sense of balance. So again, for me, getting back to the idea of confidence then. I know what I can do when things, because life has its hardships. So, but I know what to do, how to handle grief or how to handle things that are impacting me in a vibrational level that causes disturbance in the force, so to speak.
Yeah. And
And I
and
love what
it's possible to and measure those vibrational danger signals quite a bit differently. Like a lot of folks that I work with, they might say that they are highly sensitive to people's energy and they can walk in a room and read energy right away. So the more that you're in touch with energy mechanisms, the better you are at reading a room and knowing um, who energetically could be threatening.
yeah, right. And then what do you do? Not kick that person out necessarily, but what? How do I don't overreact, or I react in a more purposeful manner. This is a threat, or this person is a danger. I need to leave, or something like that. So
Or even just um, building your own defense against it, like making sure that you are energetically strong when you're in those situations. Um, uh, I believe that the more that we have these routines and practices where we are constantly reinforcing our own strength and capacity, the better prepared we are to face challenges in the future.
mhm. For me as a psychotherapist, so I see people all day long. I don't mean I joke, but all day long I'm where someone's crying or experience trauma or sadness. Like it impacts me. That world impacts me day after day, hour after hour. So what do I do in between the people that I see? Shakam. So for a minute,
Yeah,
I'll
beautiful.
want to restore my balance. And then next person, okay, talk, 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 cry, 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 sadness, sadness. Okay, thank you for coming. 1 minute, come back to myself. Okay, next person. So I have a way in which to keep myself as balanced, as I am, or I'm not, but I find a way to come back to myself so that I'm more ready now to handle, the kind of hardships that other people are facing. So then the body knows how to do it quicker. And one said the more you practice it, the body can restore itself a lot quicker rather than waiting all day long, come home.
Up until 2 years ago, I didn't have that capacity to, have the space to do that. But working from home gives us more options that way. Like you can do Qigong between meetings, between appointments. People who work virtually just have more options. When I was in a busy office, there was nowhere that I could duck into and, do a practice on my own, unless I would, go to the bathroom between every patient. But I just didn't have the physical space to have the ability to clear energetically. It's one of the things I really like working from home is I can give myself the space and time and the routine to do a practice that helps me restore that balance too.
So maybe that in terms of this conversation, other people will feel more encouraged to practice Qigong. So then they'll go to their doctor for a checkup or what. They'll say, oh, the doctor's doing some Qigong right now. She'll be with you in a minute. And everyone, oh, good, I'm glad she's doing Qigong. That it has the permission, so to speak, for you to do that. Oh, good, I'm glad the doctor's doing a minute of Qigong because now she'll be more present into hearing what I have to talk about. But at this point, if you did the Qigong, people would do what in your office or in the clinic? Oh boy, this doctor is kind of into woo-woo stuff. So maybe maybe this information, oops, we lost her.
I can still see you. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see you now. You had froze, that's all. Okay. But the more that you can practice, so to speak, publicly, and people can do that, it's a little bit, we have to keep teaching people to say this is really a valuable thing in terms of trauma and the impact of trauma on our physical and emotional bodies.
Well, when I did have a family practice at a community health center, and we actually had a volunteer Spring Forest Qigong teacher come and teach some of the patients at the center. And because I'm like a small group leader, I was able to run some small groups with, I think it was about 10 people would generally show up who had learned from one of the trainers. So we actually had a small practice of people who were using Qigong. And it was really amazing because we had this wellness center.
Well, this is very interesting how Christy has had the experience of bringing, Spring Forest Qigong into a medical center. And wouldn't that be great if we did that more often? Here's the Western medicine and here's the Qigong. It's not either or, it's a together thing. You take the medicine, follow the doctor's advice, and in between, practice Qigong. Say, Christy, I really appreciate your thoughts today. Yeah. Could you lead us in a little bit of a meditation to kind of close out our time together?
Well, Glen, I'm really nervous to do it because every 2 minutes you lose me, and I just wouldn't want to interrupt people's flow.
How about if we just, conversationally, keep on talking? We'll consider this kind of as a coming back to yourself, almost like a walking, talking meditation to end our time together. So what has
you should lead it, Glen, because I don't want people to miss out on that. My internet is just not stable enough for me to lead anything.
Well, how about this then? So if everyone could just sit still and remember Christy's voice. Remember her tone. Take the tone of Christy's voice into you. Feel that tone of her voice, the words that she was using, as vibrations. Feel the vibrations. How did the tone, the words, the explanations that Christy was talking with us about, how did those vibrations affect your body? So what did the amygdala What did the brain react to her voice? What did the nervous system act for you with her voice, her words, her vibration? What happened to your heart? Did it strike any memories from past experiences when we talked about trauma? Do you feel a bit more aware on how the body is actually set up energetically, vibrationally, to connect with the information that Christy has been sharing with us? There is a way to restore the sense in our bodies, no matter what kind of traumatic experience we've had, either an intense impact or even a gentle attack squirrel. The body knows, what it can do. And so in your heart, send out that loving energy back to Christy, to yourself, to others, about this loving nature that you have, that Christy has, and how the struggles for her about the medical field and the Qigong, is really an honorable evolution of healing. So even as you do in your own scanning of your body, scan it in a way to say, oh, I have so many beautiful systems in my body. And I now know a little bit more about how Qigong can impact the natural development of our bodies and our systems in a way that we can return our bodies, to a balanced state. So we can come back as our normal, oddities and quirk-filled people. So we can enjoy our life, so that the vibration of happiness can help us with our liver system, and the vibration of joy, our heart system, and the vibration of, peacefulness and digestive system. And in the movements where the vibration of content helps our lung system, and the vibration of gratitude, thankfulness affects our kidney system. All those systems are allies in helping the nervous system react to how it gets impacted. So I give great thanks to you, Christy, for being a part of our conversation. I hope others will as well. I can't apologize for the blockages of energy in the technology, but it's the way it is. So thank you so much.
We had a very powerful rainstorm with a lot of lightning here, so it might have knocked some power lines out, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
Maybe someone can do some Qigong along our power lines.
Yeah. Well, I sure would love to have you come back and do a part 2 when we've, fixed all those other things. So, well, thank you so much,
I'm
Christy.
sorry for my end of that. I'll just mention I'm in the same city as Munira Jiwa, so she is one of, Master Len's teachers as well, and I'm such a huge fan of her. And there's a very small Qigong exercise in my book, and on the video, I had Munira actually do the leading on the video. So I'm really lucky to be in a place where we have such a great teacher.
Yeah. Great. Well, have a good evening, Christy, and everyone else